One of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is, I can't stay consistent.
We say it to ourselves all the time. I can never stick to anything. I always start and stop. I just wish I was more disciplined. But I don't actually think that's true. I actually think you're incredibly consistent, but not other things you want to be consistent in. You're consistent with scrolling on TikTok. You're consistent with ordering takeout. You're consistent with binge watching. You're consistent with putting things off until tomorrow. You're consistent with avoiding the thing that you know you probably should be doing. We all have patterns, so maybe the problem isn't that you can't be consistent. Maybe the real question is, what have you been consistent at? Because once I realized that, everything started to make a lot more sense. My consistency was never the issue. My consistency was just attached to habits that weren't creating the life I wanted. That's when I started asking a different question. Why? Why is it so easy to stay consistent with the things that were keeping me stuck, but so hard to stay consistent with the things that could actually change my life? Why can I scroll for 2 hours without thinking twice, but 20 minutes at the gym feels impossible? Why does avoiding discomfort feel automatic, while building the life I want feels like an uphill battle? And I think the answer is those habits fit the identity that you've been living in. The person you are today has practiced those habits hundreds, maybe even thousands of times. They're familiar, they're automatic, they don't require you to be someone different. But the habits you're trying to build, the gym, the business, posting consistently, being more confident, reading more, those belong to someone you haven't yet become. And I know that's so frustrating because you've been trying to change your life for a long time. Maybe it's been a year, maybe 2, or maybe 5 years like me, but somehow you always end up back at square one. Right where you started. And after enough times, you start wondering what's wrong with you. Why does everyone else seem to be able to follow through, but you can't? But you're not asking the right question. I don't think the question is, how do I become more consistent? The better question is, who do I need to become to be consistent in the habits and actions that I want to take? See, the reason you can't stay consistent in the things you want to stay consistent in is because you haven't yet become the person who can do the things you're trying to do. That's why it feels like you're constantly negotiating with yourself. Because every day you're asking someone you've been for years to suddenly think, choose, and behave like someone you've never been before. You can't expect a different life while operating from the same identity that created your current one. But the good news is that identities can change. So how do we go about changing our identity? Well, that is the hard part. Because going through that kind of identity shift is genuinely uncomfortable. And here is the psychology behind why. Okay, so our brains get so used to operating in a certain way that the second we try to change, it just feels wrong because it's unfamiliar. Every time you try to change, you're stepping into uncertainty. There's risk, there's the unknown, and your brain views all of that as a threat. It thinks this doesn't feel safe. So what it does is pulls you back into what it's familiar with. It pulls you back into your old habits, your old behaviors, your old way of thinking, because that's who you are right now. That's your default. So every time you try to shift your identity, you snap back into who you've always been. Your brain would honestly rather have the certainty of who you are today than the uncertainty of who you could become. Even if who you are today isn't getting you anywhere close to where you want to be. Even if your current habits are producing results that you're completely unhappy with. Your brain still prefers them because it's familiar with it. And in behavioral psychology, this is referred to as status quo bias. So now that we understand the psychology, how do we actually change? How do we actually shift our identity to become the person who can be consistent in the things we want to be consistent in? Well, the first thing you need to do is notice the identity that you're currently reinforcing. Every action serves as evidence of who you are. Every time you skip the gym, that's evidence that you're collecting for who you are. Every time you scroll on TikTok, that's your brain collecting evidence. Every time you make a promise to yourself and you never see it through, that is you collecting evidence for who you currently are. So start noticing what evidence you've been collecting. Notice the paper trail that you've left behind, which leads us into our second step. Keep one small promise to yourself on purpose every single day. Now, here's where I have to be completely honest with you because I already hear the objection. If I can't take consistent action because I don't yet have the identity, how am I supposed to take an action to build the identity? Right? It seems counterintuitive, and it is. If you think of identity and action as linear, identity first, then action follows, but that's not actually how it works. It's not a line, it's a loop. Your identity directs your actions. Your actions reinforce your beliefs about who you think you are, which shapes the identity a little more, which then directs the next action a bit more easily, which becomes evidence again. See, it's identity, action, evidence, then back at identity again. It's a loop. But nobody ever tells us that. We're taught that it's linear, at least that's how I was taught, that it's a straight line. You become her, then you act like her, then you have what she has. And then when that doesn't work, we start to assume that there's something wrong with us. But the truth is, you're never supposed to become her first. You're supposed to find a way into that loop. And here's how you actually get in. The action has to be small enough. Listen to me now. The action has to be small enough that it doesn't require your future identity to pull it off. It only has to require the person you are today. For instance, let's say you want to go to the gym, but you've been struggling to go consistently, right? And instead of telling yourself or trying to make yourself go every single day for like 30 minutes a day, break it down into a small actionable step that your current self can do. It could be something as simple as putting on your gym shoes today. That's something you and I, we both know we can do it, okay? Listen, small isn't the point because it's easier. It's the point because your current identity can actually do it. That's what starts the loop. That's the whole mechanism. Smallness is what makes the first turn of the loop possible for the person you are right now. You don't need the future version of yourself to take one small action. You need one small action your current self can do. And that becomes evidence. That evidence nudges the identity. And the identity makes the action easier to choose next time. And slowly, the loop gets stronger than the old one. That's the how. It's not motivation. It's not waiting until you feel ready. It's small action, real evidence, strengthened identity, easier action. Again and again until the loop is who you are. And now for step 3, which ties back into step 2, let the evidence build before you can expect to change. A lot of us go about change expecting it to be instantaneous, expecting to see the results you want to receive overnight. And life doesn't happen that way. Small incremental changes take time before you can get to that pivotal moment where you get what you want to get or you become who you want to become. It takes time. So let that evidence accumulate. Don't assume that just because you can't see the results you want to see right now, that nothing is happening. Change is happening, but you just can't see it yet. So trust the process. Let that evidence accumulate. Stack the small proof first. The identity shift follows the pattern and doesn't precede it, okay? So let the evidence build before you expect any change to occur. But as I've been thinking about this, I've realized something. Psychology explains how identity changes, how it's formed, why we are where we are right now. But for me, my faith tells me who my identity should become. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." And I used to think that renewing your mind meant thinking more positively. But I don't think that's what Paul meant. Maybe the goal isn't to see yourself as a different person. Maybe the goal is to start to see yourself the way God sees you. Your mind is renewed by God's truth. Your actions become evidence that you're living from that truth. Little by little, your identity changes. And that's just me from a faith-backed perspective. If I'm being honest, letting go of who you currently are is scary. Because letting go of an identity that you've lived and held on to for years, even if it's an identity that's hurting you, is still letting go. But I think that's why so many of us stay stuck, because deep down we know what real change requires. We all know. It isn't just waking up earlier or downloading another habit tracker. Real change asks you to become someone different. And becoming someone different means letting someone else go. I don't think we talk about that enough, right? We always talk about what we need to add. Add more discipline, add better habits, add another morning routine. But real transformation is just as much about who you're willing to leave. The version of you who always hits snooze, like me. The version of you that keeps numbing yourself through social media or through food. The version of you that reacts to every emotion. The version of you that's become comfortable settling, where you know that you're meant for more and you're destined for more. Because you can't hold on to your current identity while expecting to become someone new. At that point, you have to decide, who am I willing to become? So I don't think your lack of consistency was ever about discipline or motivation. And honestly, even if it was, that wouldn't change the bigger truths. The people who make consistency look effortless, the people you and I watch on TV, the people you and I read self-help books from, those people aren't necessarily more talented. They aren't necessarily more motivated. They've just become the kind of person for whom those habits feel natural. And yes, they're still met with resistance, right? There are still days where those types of people wake up and don't want to get out of bed. But they become the person for whom it's easier, a lot easier, to make the decision to get up and do what they have to do. They become the kind of person who can just take action. And that's the work that you and I have to do too, right? Becoming the person who doesn't have to negotiate with herself every single day. The kind of woman who doesn't wake up every morning debating on whether or not she should go to the gym, or whether she's going to post, or whether she's going to work on the business. She just doesn't, because that's who she's become. And that's what we're really after at the end of the day. We want these habits to feel normal. We want consistency to become our default. We want things that feel uncomfortable today to eventually become our new comfort zone. Now, does that happen overnight? Of course not. So don't expect it to. Don't fall into that trap of trying to change your life in one day, or in 1 week, or in 1 month. It takes time, it takes intention, it takes repetition. But every time you choose those small promises, you're reinforcing a new identity. You're becoming someone new. So if there's anything you take away from this video, let it be this. You are not trying to become a consistent person. You already are one. Question has always been, what are you trying to become consistent at? And who you need to become so that you can be consistent in those things. Because every action, every small promise, every piece of evidence that you collect is shaping the person you'll become tomorrow. It's bringing you 1% closer to where you've always wanted to be, or living the life you've always wanted to live. Identities can change. Habits can change. Programming can change, which means that you can change too. That's the work. Not chasing motivation, not waiting until you feel ready, becoming. One decision, one habit, one tiny promise kept at a time. So that's all I have for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video has blessed you and inspired you. And if you are finally ready to build the life that you always wanted to have, to stop dreaming and start doing, then subscribe to my channel, because that's all I talk about. I'm here to help you start building the life that you've always wanted to have. So I want you to make every dream, to make every fantasy, to make every vision that you have become reality, become something that you actually experience instead of just something that remains in your imagination. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please subscribe to my channel. And as always, my name is Tomi, and I will see you guys in the next video.